Thank you, Jess. Hi, everyone. Again, I'm Ryan Beach, Senior Application Specialist here at Ken Micro. I want to get started today and really try and keep this to less than 30 minutes if possible. So I want to start it with trim again. I know I mentioned this yesterday, but there's one detail which I missed, which is hold down the Shift key. So if I switch over to SOLIDWORKS here super quick, and I'm just going to draw out a line and a line, and then go like this. So yesterday what I showed was in my power trim, if I click on my line, drag, I can drag it up to here, snap, and then let go. But a faster and better way, which my colleague actually showed me, was if I go back into trim again, hold down Shift, and as soon as I drag over while holding down Shift key, we see it's automatically extending. So that's the first one again. Hold down Shift, then drag over, and that'll automatically extend. So that's one down. Now this next one, or these next two, are things that any project manager or anyone doing design reviews is going to love, which is large design review edit mode and detailing mode. So if anyone has very large assemblies, or a better way of looking at very slow assemblies and very slow drawings, you'll like these two. So large design review edit mode's 2019, detailing mode is 2020. So I switch back over to SOLIDWORKS in here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open up here with my welcome menu. When I will launch this very large assembly right here of 4,000 components. And as I mentioned, I'm short on time, so I can't load all 4,000 normally. But if I choose this large design review edit mode, and I click on open, we're going to be able to open up this roughly 4,000 part assembly here in just a few seconds. So what we can do is we can insert components, delete, move and rotate, create and edit and delete mates. You can also use linear patterns in here too. So while this loads up, and this is only going to launch and load the top level mates. And what we're going to be taking a look at once this launches is just the graphics triangles. It will not be loading anything else here. So in about another 5 or so seconds here, we should see this fully loaded. Okay, there it is. So it's already fully loaded. And again, this has got several thousand components. Normally, this would take a few minutes for me to launch. And what I can do is I can also insert components into here. So for example, if I want to grab an arbitrary part, maybe right in here, pick this random part. And this is all in this large design review mode right in here. So it's very quick very awesome for making very quick changes to your really big assemblies. Again, you can add in mates, you can pattern said components in here and do all this kind of stuff. And again, that's large design review edit. So I'm going to close out of this assembly in here now. And the next part is the drawings. Again, another part which a lot of people will find sometimes you might have drawings that take several minutes to launch. There's this new option in here. And if you go File, Open on any of your drawings, it'll be under the Open menu. In this case, I'm using the Welcome, which is Detailing Mode. So if I choose Detailing Mode and I click on Open, again, we're going to open up this same assembly, except what we can now do is we got the ability to add in annotations and notes, balloons. We can do print, sketch entities, and add in dimensions. So here it is, same assembly. This normally is quite large, very, very slow to load. Just launch right away. And again, we can add in smart dimensions in here and this kind of stuff. Now, what this is not going to show us, for example, is the updated model. So if you need to see all the updates, you will need to right mouse button over here and then choose to resolve the drawing. But if it's just a matter of, oh, for example, I forgot to add in a balloon of this one component over in here, for example. It's really quick and easy just to click on that component, add in the balloon. Now we can't use views in here, but again, the goal is annotations, dimensions, the typical stuff that we would probably miss very often. So I do recommend using detailing mode. It's quite useful. Next is chain dimension, detail scale view. Thank you to Mark for this, who sent in a message yesterday, and page up, page down. Then to go backwards at this slightly, I'm going to start with page up, page down here. So by default, mine are not doing anything. But what's really cool is if I go into my customize in here, look for my keyboard shortcuts. I'm going to search right in here now for page. Sorry, it's not page, it will be sheet, if memory serves. There it is. Next sheet, I'm going to say page down. Previous sheet, I'm going to say page up, which will load in here as prior and next. So now I can go page up and page down to switch between my drawing views in here. Oh, it looks like it does not work in detailing mode, apparently. That's interesting. Just tried that out for the first time. But in normal drawings, if you use page up, page down, it'll switch between the views. Now next is chain dimensions. So I'm just going to make a drawing here from this part, or this assembly in here. And maybe I can show that page up, page down again. And let's throw in this view in here. That's sufficient. And let's add in an extra sheet right in here. Okay, so now if I switch between page up, page down, okay, so now we can see it working in here. Now, next is chain dimension. So if I go to my S key, which I showed yesterday, we've got this drop down in here, and we should see this new option here for 2020 chain dimension. It allows, it's similar to using the ordinate dimensions, except will give us dimensions between each edge. So we're gonna get results like this. And what's also really useful about chain dimension is I can do a right mouse button in here, add in overall dimension too. And then top it off, we can drag to move around all my dimensions in here too. So that's chain dimension. Now, detailing, doing a detail view, scaling the view. So this is where I have to say thank you to Mark, as I was not aware of this until yesterday, where if I go into here and I choose my detail view, throw in my view right in here, and there's my view. Now what's really cool is that I can change the numbers in here, which I was not aware of I could do this, and I can now make this, say, for example, a 4:5, and if I go here, we can now change the view scale. So I was not aware of that till yesterday. So again, if anyone's any other tips and tricks they'd like to share, welcome to hear them, whether you think it's basic or not. Love to hear it regardless. Next, rapid sketch, replace entity, and then the Alt, H, and Q for horizontal and equal. So what I'm gonna do is right here, I'm just gonna Control Tab over to this part, as I can demo this more or less all at once here. If I click on this rapid sketch button, what this allows me to do is if I hover over this face, what you'll notice if I zoom in, is kind of already pre-selecting the planes for me. So this is really, really useful if you wanted to sketch on multiple faces really, really quickly. So again, I can start sketching on this face. Now you notice I'm now hovering over this face over here. I can now throw a rectangle in here. Maybe I'm gonna throw a rectangle up top. Maybe I'll throw a rectangle on this back face in here. So that's rapid sketch command. Again, really, really useful. It's in the sketch tab in here. Now, replace entity. So what I'm gonna do is in here, I'm gonna roll back up to this extruded boss in here now. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna change this sketch around in here. So what I'll do is I'm gonna go to my 3-point arc, throw in my arc right in here. If you've taken essentials before, you will have seen this before. So normally we hit delete. It's gonna say sketcher confirm delete. Do you wanna replace the entity? Normally just simply say yes. In this case, I'll say replace. I'll choose to replace it with this one. Then we've got an option, make a construction or delete. Let's just say delete in this case. Now I'm gonna say okay. And then as soon as I roll back down, normally all these other subsequent features in here will be all broken. In this case, they're all perfectly fine. So it did not break any of these other features in here at all. And that's why it's so useful. So if we're just to change it arbitrarily just by saying delete, change line, these chamfers, this extrude, and these cuts will break automatically. And now this Alt H and Alt Q. So this one is really, really useful. So for example, if I'm drawing out, and I showed this yesterday, where if I do the rectangle really quickly, and now if I press Alt C, that converts to construction. What you can also do with the Alt key is, you'll notice in here, as soon as I press, if I zoom in on the left-hand side right here, as soon as I click the Alt key once, we then see we've got F for equals, and wherever it says underscore, for example, in this case, the Q for equals, but now I go Alt Q, what I just did was I just made my rectangle in here a square. So I added in that equal relation. We could do the same thing for horizontal lines by throwing a line in here, and let's throw another line like this. I can now go Alt H, and now I can go Alt V for horizontal and vertical, for example. So again, if you want to know what they are, simply click on your line, for example, and then you'll see the options appear here. Just press Alt, and you'll see the underscore line. Okay. Multi-page view, filters, and mouse gestures. So I'm going to switch back over to that drawing again here. So I'm going to close that in my current view. Let's see here, if I Control Tab back over here. So mouse gestures, if we want to start with this one, everyone should be using mouse gestures. If we go to the customize up top in here, go to our mouse gestures tab over in here. They've updated this for SOLIDWORKS 2018, where you now get this graphical interface. Then we can choose to either have 2 options, 3 options, 4 options, 8 options, or 12 options in here. So you can go crazy and have all these various mouse gestures in here if you want. So again, I find it's really, really useful, or maybe you want to have just 3 for doing some basic stuff if you prefer. But again, I highly recommend everyone should set up mouse gestures. Also, you can also print this too if you want to remember what they are. So that's another note to keep in mind of. Now, filters. You notice at the very bottom, I already have this filter bar in here. So if anyone ever gets this funnel right in here, that is your filter. In this case, I press the E key, It also works, I believe, for X, which should be for surfaces. So E is edges, X is for surfaces, but don't quote me on that, I can't quite remember. But regardless of having to remember what letter it is for, it isn't for, if you press F5, that'll show us our filter bar. Oh, that's correct, faces and edges. And now F6 will turn them on or off. So if I now click, let's say, for example, I want to select in here is a common one, only notes and balloons. So now as I'm going through and doing my layout, for example, in here, annotation balloon, this will prevent me from dragging my views around. So now I can't accidentally start moving these views. I can only select my balloons, and you'll notice I cannot select any of my dimensions. So again, filters are very, very useful. F6 turns it off, and F6 will turn it back on again. So just press F6 if you ever see that funnel. It's right in there. And now multi-page view. So in this case, I've got two sheets. And let's say right in here, let's add in a third sheet, and I'll say, okay. So what we can do is, especially if you have an ultra wide monitor, if I say in here, window, new window, and they say the same thing in here again, window, new window. And now what I want to do is I want to do the tile vertical. So now on my first one, I can have page 1. My second one, I can have page 2. And now my third sheet, I can now have my page 3. So this again allows for viewing multiple pages for doing any kind of design review or just doing typical dimensioning really, really, really quickly. And again, the wider your screen, the better, because then the more of these you can show. Okay. Let's see. Shaded sketch contours, previous selection, and sketch biad here. So I'm going to close out of my current drawings in here now. And I want to quickly mention in here the shaded sketch contours. So if I go into here now, I'm going to make a new part. And I would imagine most people are aware of this, but in case anyone isn't, if I go like this and I get a circle right in here, I'm going to go right in here. You'll notice right now I've got nothing shaded in here. By default, this is shaded, so you can click on it and select in here, and we can select and grab in the shaded areas. For example, we don't want to be picky on the shaded area at all. We might find this gets in the way, that isn't ideal. So what we're looking for in here is a shaded contours button right in here. This is where I can turn it on and turn it off in here if you find that gets in the way sometimes. Now, previous selection is sketch biad. So next one I'm going to show is sketch biad. So if I go again here, let's go new part. So again, this one's really, really useful. So I'm going to draw a line on an angle. I'm going to specify from the singular line at, say, 40 degrees. And what I can do is if I pull my smart dimension using mouse gestures, if I go line and my point, and I'll get these arrows right in here. So now I can simply click on that arrow, and now it allows me to now say, hey, this is 40 degrees. But then I can also go the other way around, where I can also go in here, point and line. So it doesn't matter whether you go line and point or point and line. The only rule of thumb that applies is it must be of the same line, for example. So I can't, for example, choose a different line and then use this point. It's got to be the same one. But again, this allows us to create angular lines without having to create that typical construction line. And now previous selection. So if I switch over to this guy right in here, and let's say, for example, I need to pick this face, this face, this face, and this one, and then that happens. We click off and we lose all of our faces. Normally we go back through and click everything again, but what we can do is we can do a right mouse button, and there's an option right in here if I zoom in. Let's see here. So I do a right mouse button again, previous selection. I can pick that, and you'll notice I just got that selection back again in there. So again, right mouse button, previous selection. Next, silhouette entities, double click up the surface, and then shift select transparent faces. So what I'm going to start out with silhouette entities. This is new for 2020. So I type right in here now silhouette entities, or just start typing a command in here. Let's see if I can get it to show up here. Okay, so let's go into this case for my part here, because it's not loading up at the moment for my assembly. But what we can do is here, it's kind of like a convert entities, but even more useful. It looks like it's grayed out for me at the moment. I'm not quite sure why, so I'm going to move on. So instead what I'll do is I'll talk you through it. So the idea is that when we use silhouette entities, we can take this entire outside boundary, for example, and can create like a silhouette sketch. And it's going to kind of trace this entire thing in here. So that's the purpose of the silhouette entities. Now next, double click up the surface and then shift select transparent faces. So if, for example, in here, and let's rotate this around, I'm going to make, for example, this component, let's say transparent. Normally, if you have the system option turned off, you'll be picking the faces in here. But if, for example, you want to pick this face, if you press and hold the shift key and then click the face, now you can click this transparent face instead of clicking through always in here. And now double click up the surface. So for this one, it's going to make a box super quick right in here. So let's draw a line and let's go with our, actually, no, let's do this a bit differently. Let's go like this, and something like this. And let's extrude this out. So now what I want to do is I want to do my sketch off of this face right in here. Oh, let's make sure I turn on my sketch option right in here, and let's go sketch, circle. And now what I want to do is I'm going to do my extruded cut, except instead of just saying blind through all, what we can do is just by double clicking on this face, it turns into an automatic up to surface. So again, what you want to do is as soon as you're in the cut extrude command, double click on a face, switches up to surface. So it's great if you're going up to a complex surface, for example. Okay, so next three are tab, shift tab, and the control key. So in here, for example, what do we want to do is I want to be able to hide certain components and unhide them. So if I use the tab key and I start clicking over components here, you notice I start hiding them. Also, if I just hold down the tab key, I'm not clicking with my mouse here, I'm clicking with the tab button, by the way. So right now I'm just hovering my mouse over these components, and as I hover over the component, they hide. So if I hold down shift tab, as I hover back over where they are again, we can begin to make them reappear. And if I mentioned from yesterday, control shift tab will show us for missing any additional components in here too. So again, I can use tab, tab, and I hold down shift tab. It will show the components in here. And now control key. So this is useful now for mates. So for example, in here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of, if I grab this component in here, I want to get rid of that coincident mate right in there. So let's go to our mates and let's get rid of that guy right in there. So what we can also do is here too. So if I grab, for example, this face, and now let's press, now let's rotate around and let's grab this face right in here. What you'll notice is that we get this context menu that appears right in here to add in various mates. So what happens is that if we move our mouse away, that context menu disappears. And if I move my mouse back over, it's still gone. So what you want to do is put your mouse back in the same area, hit the control key, then it'll come back. Now I can add in that distance mate, click OK. And in 2020 as well too, in this context menu, they've also added in some new options in here as well for angle mate, limit mate. They've also added in some option here too for slot mate and width mate in here as well. Okay, so that's quick mates, alt drag. So this one's really, really useful. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to undo that mate, which I just threw in here. And I also want to get rid of that concentric mate in here too. And actually a better example would be with this subassembly. So let's switch back over to here. Oh, if I can grab that drop down arrow here, let's try that again. Okay, so I've got this knob right on here. I'm just going to go in and I want to get rid of these two mates right in here. So now I can rotate this around. So if I pick this edge, we can do that control select, throw in the mates and away we go. Or if I hold down the alt key, then I click on this edge, this inside edge right in here, and I start dragging, you'll notice how a paperclip appears on the mouse. Then what I want to do is if I go over top of this face, you'll notice how it switches, and if you look really closely at my screen, it might be kind of small, but you should see a couple of arrows showing a planar mate right now, or just a coincident mate. But if I hover over the hole, it switches to what's called a pin and hole mate. So it's going to add in two mates in here. So it's going to add in both a concentric and a coincident. And we check the concentric, they'll be face to face. And if we check that coincident mate as well, they're also face to face. So again, alt drag, really, really useful for just mating both to planar faces and for the pin and hole mate. Now, custom threads. So if anyone here is ever having to work with custom threads, for example, in the design library, we've got in here our threads. So if you ever want to make custom threads, they are buried within our features in here under the inch, if memory serves. And now let's see, it should be inch SLDLP. So you know what, I'll go back to custom threads here in a second once I can dig for it. So convert to bodies. There's this one, again, really, really useful. So if I've got this part in here, what we want to do is if we ever want to send out, say, this part or something else to a customer, and we know they've got SOLIDWORKS, but we don't want to give them our entire feature tree, for example, we can do a right mouse button in here, and there's an option in here for convert to bodies. So this came out in 2017, and this will allow us to save out this file, and I'll call this under underscore body, for example. And let's say save as and open, and we can even choose to preserve reference geometry and sketches if we want. So now once I convert this out to my body, this will load up. And now what we're going to see is just this converted geometry in here with the sketch. So again, here's our sketch, and there's a body geometry, but there's no actual feature information here. We can only just suppress this or unsuppress this. So it's great a way of sending out files to customers that we know, for example, have SOLIDWORKS, but we don't want to give them our actual IP or the actual steps of how to remake the part. Now, file reload. So in here, for example, if I go and make a change, let's make this say 0.9, and let's hit rebuild. But let's say, for example, in here, and now we can see, oh, we've even got an error in here, so actually even better. And let's say we don't want to save that change, but we want to completely relaunch our part again. We go File, Reload. We can choose to reload this file right in here. We'll say, okay, it's asking, hey, this is requesting a save. Do you want to sure you want to reload it? Click OK. And now it's going to go back to what it was before in there. So again, it's like a really fast close and open. So again, that's File, Reload. Now, customize the task pane. So over here on the right-hand side, we have our task pane. If we ever want to either remove certain tabs in here or have a certain one set as default, we can do a right mouse button, customize, and we can choose which one we want to have as our default. So maybe, for example, I maybe wanted to have it as my design library as my default one, or maybe it's the file explorer, or it could be the appearances or custom properties. If anyone uses the property tab builder, we can set, for example, this one is our default. So now in here, as soon as we click on it, it's always going loaded on this one. And we can also, within here, choose to remove certain options in here too. So maybe I don't want the form on here. So I can turn off the form, and maybe let's say I don't use appearances or decals. So I can turn off what I don't want and only keep what I want to have in here in this task pane on the right-hand side. Now, I saved the best for last in here, which is some Windows shortcuts. So yesterday I mentioned for the shift for the Windows 0 to 9. So for example, if I press my Windows key, and if I say, let's go Windows 4, then in this case, it'll open up my file explorer in here. But what I can also do in here too, is if I want to open up another instance of file explorer, there is also Windows E, by the way. But you go Shift Windows 4, this will let me open up new windows. So in this case, I need to open up control panel here. It should be number 6. I can load up now 2 instances of control panel right in here with, in this case, because mine's number 6. So Control Shift, sorry, Windows Shift, and then a number key. Now, if you ever need to open up a program, for example, like SOLIDWORKS in an elevated mode, in this case, I want to launch Notepad++ in here as admin. Maybe we need to save it somewhere, which is requiring admin rights. So instead of just clicking open or hitting run as admin, we can also go in here and we can press Control Shift Enter key. And then you'll notice in here by default, if I zoom in up top, this now says right in here, Notepad as administrator. So now I can save out this file straight to my C drive, for example, in here. Now, I saved the best for last. Windows V. If all of you in your machines right now as well also press Windows V, what you'll see is this clipboard in here. So this is going to keep a history of everything that you copy and paste in here. So if I go back a slide for a second, and let's say I'm going to go into Word in here, or even right in here, and grab this arbitrary text. Let's Control C that. And now I can Control V it. But if I press Windows V, I can even see a history of it here too. So now maybe I'm going to copy this bit, throw this in another new one, hit Control V. Perhaps now I'm going to copy, let's see, where's my cursor at in here? There it is. Control C that, Control V that. And now as soon as I press Windows V, I can see everything which I just copied in here. And what we can also do in here is we can also pin certain bits of information here too. And then if we want to clear it, we can do a click on these three dots, hit clear all, and then to clear everything that has not been pinned. And if you ever want to unpin whatever's in here too, you can say unpin, then clear all. So again, that's the Windows V, and that's your clipboard history. If it's not working for you, press Windows key I. That'll open up your Windows settings and search for right in here now clip for a clipboard. And now